The biting wind tore at Bethany Blackburn's skin as she tumbled down the jagged slope, rocks slicing her flesh and tearing her once fine dress to shreds. Her scream echoed through the canyon walls before being swallowed by the howling storm that had descended without warning on this October evening of 1873. Her body came to rest at the bottom of the ravine, the cruel Wyoming sky darkening above her as consciousness slipped away. When Bethany woke, the world was painted in shades of pain. Her leg twisted at an unnatural angle, blood matting her honey-blonde hair to her temple. Night had fallen fully, bringing with it a bone-chilling cold that penetrated her torn clothing. The memory of how she'd ended up here came back in flashes: the stagecoach robbery, the outlaws who had taken everything of value before pushing her from the ridge when she'd recognized one of them as the sheriff's deputy. Bethany tried to move and cried out as agony lanced through her broken leg. She was 23 years old and about to freeze to death in a canyon, miles from the nearest town. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her. She'd traveled all the way from Boston to teach at the new schoolhouse in Silver Creek, only to die before ever meeting a single student. As the temperature continued to drop, Bethany dragged herself beneath a small overhang in the canyon wall. It offered minimal protection from the elements, but it was better than nothing. Using strips torn from her petticoat, she bound her leg as best she could, teeth chattering so violently she bit her tongue. The coppery taste of blood filled her mouth as tears streaked down her dirt-stained cheeks. "Help!" she called, her voice feeble against the roaring wind. "Please, someone help me." But there was no one to hear her cries in this desolate stretch of wilderness. The stagecoach wasn't due to be missed until it failed to arrive in Silver Creek tomorrow. By then, she would be nothing more than another tragic tale of the untamed West. Hours passed in a haze of pain and increasing numbness. The storm grew in ferocity, rain now mixing with the wind, soaking her to the skin. Bethany felt herself drifting, the cold a strange comfort now as it dulled her senses. Perhaps this was a merciful way to die, she thought distantly, simply falling asleep. Her eyes had just fluttered closed when she heard it, the rhythmic pounding of hooves against hard, packed earth. At first, she believed it to be a hallucination, her mind offering comfort in her final moments. But the sound grew louder, more distinct. With the last of her strength, Bethany called out again, her voice barely audible even to her own ears. She couldn't see above the rim of the canyon, couldn't know if anyone was truly there or if her mind was playing cruel tricks. The hoofbeats stopped. "Hello," a man's voice called, deep and resonant, cutting through the storm. "Is somebody down there?" "Here," Bethany cried, forcing volume into her failing voice. "I'm here." For an agonizing moment, there was silence. Then came the sounds of movement, a horse being secured, the crunch of boots on loose rock. A lantern's glow appeared at the ridge, bobbing as its bearer navigated the treacherous descent. Through the curtain of rain, a tall figure materialized, moving with surprising grace down the steep canyon wall. As he drew closer, the lantern illuminated a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes as clear and blue as a summer sky. The man wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the storm, water streaming from its edges and a duster that whipped around his long legs. "Good Lord," he breathed when he reached her, crouching to hold the lantern closer. "What happened to you, Miss Stagecoach?" "Robbed," Bethany managed through chattering teeth. "They pushed me." "Those bastards," he muttered, setting down his lantern and shrugging out of his duster. With gentle hands he wrapped the coat around her trembling form. The warmth of it, still carrying his body heat, felt like salvation. "I'm Quint Ryder. Most folks just call me Quint." "Bethany Blackburn," she whispered as he examined her injuries with careful fingers. "That leg's broken for sure. he said grimly, "and you're half frozen. We need to get you somewhere warm and fast." He glanced up at the canyon rim, calculating. "I can't carry you up that way in this storm. We'll have to find shelter down here for the night." "I don't think I can walk," Bethany said, embarrassment coloring her cheeks despite her dire situation. "You won't need to," Quint replied, and before she could protest, he had gathered her into his arms, lifting her as if she weighed nothing at all. The pain of being moved tore a cry from her throat, but he held her securely against his chest. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his breath warm against her cold cheek. "I know it hurts, but we've got to move." With the lantern hooked on his belt, casting wild shadows as they moved, Quint carried Bethany through the canyon. The storm raged overhead, but his stride never faltered. He moved with the sure-footedness of someone who knew this land intimately, ducking beneath overhangs and navigating around boulders. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a deeper recess in the canyon wall, almost a cave, though not quite as deep. It was dry inside, protected from the wind and rain. "This'll have to do," Quint said, carefully setting Bethany down on the sandy floor. "Wait here." As if she could go anywhere, Bethany thought wryly, watching as he disappeared back into the storm. The absence of his warmth was immediate and devastating. She huddled in his duster, drawing it tighter around herself, and wondered if he would return or if this had all been a cruel dream. But minutes later, Quint reappeared, leading a magnificent chestnut stallion and carrying saddlebags. He tethered the horse near the entrance where it would have some protection from the elements, then set about making camp with practiced efficiency. From his saddlebags came a bedroll, which he spread near the back wall, and a small bundle of kindling and wood. "Always carry dry wood," he explained, catching Bethany's questioning look. "First rule of traveling these parts, especially in autumn when storms can blow in without warning." Soon, a small fire danced in the center of their shelter, its warmth a blessing beyond measure. Quint helped Bethany closer to it, then set about examining her leg more thoroughly. "This is going to hurt," he warned, hands poised above her broken limb. "But I need to set it before the swelling gets worse." Bethany nodded, steeling herself. "Do what you must." His eyes held hers for a moment, a silent acknowledgement of her courage, then he moved with swift precision. The pain was blinding, white-hot and all-consuming. Bethany's scream echoed off the stone walls before she bit it back, tears streaming down her face. "There," Quint said softly when it was done. Using straight branches from his supplies and strips of cloth, he fashioned a splint. "You handled that better than most men I've known." Bethany managed a weak smile, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cold. "My father always said I was too stubborn for my own good. In this case, that stubbornness might save your life." Quint offered her a canteen. "Drink. You need water." The water was cool and sweet, washing away the taste of fear and blood. While she drank, Quint tended his horse, then returned with more items from his saddlebags: jerky, hardtack, and a small flask. "Not much of a meal," he apologized, offering her the provisions. "But it's better than nothing." "It's a feast," Bethany replied honestly, accepting a piece of jerky. Only now did she realize how hungry she was, having eaten nothing since breakfast that morning. They ate in companionable silence, the fire crackling between them, the storm howling outside their small haven. Quint occasionally rose to add wood to the flames or check on his horse. In the flickering light, Bethany studied her rescuer. He wasn't classically handsome, not like the refined gentleman of Boston. His face was too angular, his skin too tanned from long days under the western sun. A scar ran along his jawline, and his hands were calloused and strong. But there was something compelling about him, a quiet confidence, an inherent gentleness that belied his rugged appearance. "What brings a Boston lady all the way to Wyoming territory?" Quint asked finally, settling back down across from her. His perceptiveness startled her. "How did you know I'm from Boston?" A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Your accent. Faint, but it's there. And your clothes, what's left of them, are too fine for these parts." Bethany glanced down at her ruined dress, once a lovely blue wool that had been her pride. "I came to teach at the school in Silver Creek. They advertised for a teacher with experience in both primary education and music." "Ah," Quint nodded. "I heard they were expecting a new schoolmarm. Town's been buzzing about it for weeks." "And you?" Bethany asked, curious about this man who'd appeared like an answered prayer. "Do you live in Silver Creek?" "Not in town, no. Got a ranch about 10 miles out the Double R. Was heading back from delivering some horses to Fort Laramie when the storm hit." He gestured toward the canyon. "Decided to cut through here to save time. Lucky for both of us I did." "Lucky indeed," Bethany murmured, shivering despite the fire and his coat. Quint noticed immediately. "You're still cold." Without hesitation, he moved to her side of the fire, sitting close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Body heat's the best way to ward off the chill. Any protest Bethany might have made died on her lips as another violent shiver racked her frame. Propriety seemed a distant concern when survival was at stake. She allowed him to draw her against his side, his arm around her shoulders like a living shield against the cold. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling warmth slowly seep back into her bones. "For everything. I would have died out there." "Just happened to be in the right place," Quint said softly. "Anyone would have done the same." But they both knew that wasn't true. In this wild country, people passed by others in need all the time, too focused on their own survival to lend aid. A man who would stop during a storm, who would climb down a canyon wall to rescue a stranger, that was rare indeed. As the night wore on, the storm showed no sign of abating. Thunder rolled overhead, and rain pounded against the stone outside their shelter. Exhaustion tugged at Bethany, but pain kept sleep at bay. "You should rest," Quint said, noticing her heavy-lidded eyes and the tight line of her mouth that spoke of suppressed pain. From his pocket, he withdrew the small flask he'd shown earlier. "This might help, just a little." Bethany hesitated, then accepted the flask. The whiskey burned a trail down her throat but spread warmth through her belly. She handed it back with a small cough that made Quint chuckle. "Not used to frontier medicine, I take it." She shook her head, feeling the whiskey's effects, already a pleasant numbness creeping into her limbs, dulling the sharpest edges of her pain. "We had laudanum at home, for headaches and women's complaints. Never whiskey." "Laudanum has its place," Quint allowed, "but out here, whiskey's more reliable and serves more purposes." They talked as the night deepened, sharing stories to ward off the darkness. Quint told her of his journey west after the war, of working cattle drives before saving enough to buy his small ranch. Bethany spoke of Boston, of teaching the daughters of wealthy merchants, of her decision to seek adventure in the West after her parents' deaths left her alone in the world. "Brave," Quint commented, his voice holding genuine admiration. "Most women wouldn't travel so far alone." "Or foolish," Bethany countered with a rueful smile, "considering where I've ended up." "No," he said firmly, his blue eyes serious in the firelight. "Not foolish. Unlucky, maybe. But not foolish." Something in his gaze made her breath catch, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or whiskey spreading through her chest. Bethany looked away first, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, of his arm still around her shoulders. "You should try to sleep," Quint said gently. "Tomorrow will be difficult enough without exhaustion making it worse." He helped her lie down on the bedroll, positioning her broken leg carefully. Then, to her surprise, he stretched out beside her, his body a warm barrier between her and the cold stone wall. "I'll keep the fire going," he promised, drawing his duster over them both. "Sleep if you can." Despite the pain, despite the strangeness of lying beside a man she'd met only hours before, Bethany found herself drifting off, lulled by the steady rhythm of Quint's breathing and the security of his presence. She woke once in the night, disoriented and cold despite the fire and the coat. Pain throbbed in her leg and a small moan escaped her lips before she could stop it. Instantly, Quint was awake, his voice low and soothing in the darkness. "Easy now. I'm here." He held her closer, his arms encircling her fully as tremors shook her frame. "You're safe," he murmured against her hair. "I've got you." In his embrace, with his heartbeat strong and steady against her back, Bethany finally surrendered to exhaustion, slipping into a dreamless sleep. Dawn broke with subdued light filtering into their shelter. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed clean sky and air that smelled of wet earth and sage. Bethany woke to find Quint already up, tending his horse and preparing to break camp. "Morning," he greeted, bringing her a canteen of fresh water. "How's the leg?" "Painful," Bethany admitted. "But I'll manage," Quint nodded, his expression approving. "We need to get you to a doctor. Silver Creek's closest, and they'll be looking for you anyway when the stage doesn't arrive." "How will we?" Bethany glanced at her splinted leg, unable to imagine riding a horse in her condition. "I'll fashion a travois for you to lie on. Thunder here is strong enough to pull it, even up the canyon path I know." True to his word, Quint constructed a conveyance using branches, rope, and his bedroll. It was crude but functional. With infinite care, he lifted Bethany onto it, making sure her leg was properly supported. "It won't be the most comfortable journey," he warned, "but it'll get us there." The ascent from the canyon was arduous. Though Quint had found a less steep path than the one he'd descended the night before, it was still rough going. Every bump and jolt sent spikes of pain through Bethany's broken leg, but she bit her lip and endured without complaint. At the top, the world opened up into the vast Wyoming landscape, rolling hills covered in autumn-brown grass, mountains blue in the distance. After the confinement of the canyon, the openness was almost overwhelming. Quint secured the travois to Thunder's saddle, then mounted. With gentle commands, he guided the horse at a careful pace, constantly glancing back to check on Bethany. They traveled all morning, stopping occasionally for water and rest. The sun climbed higher, warming the air, and Bethany found herself dozing despite the discomfort of the travois. When she woke, Quint was walking beside the horse, leading him by the reins instead of riding. "Why are you walking?" she asked, her voice rough with sleep and thirst. "Thunder needs a break from carrying both me and pulling you," Quint explained, passing her the canteen. "And I don't mind stretching my legs." The consideration touched her deeply. This man, this stranger who owed her nothing, continued to show her kindnesses both large and small. Around midday, they crested a rise, and a town appeared in the valley below. Buildings clustered around a main street, smoke rising from chimneys, the glint of a small river winding nearby. "Silver Creek," Quint announced. "Population 312, last I heard. Though they might need to update that count, now that you're here." Relief washed over Bethany, followed swiftly by an unexpected pang of regret. Their journey was ending, and soon Quint would deliver her to the doctor, fulfill his Good Samaritan duty, and return to his ranch. The thought left a hollow feeling in her chest. Their arrival in Silver Creek caused quite a stir. People emerged from shops and homes to stare at the unusual sight of a man leading a horse pulling a travois with a battered woman upon it. Quint ignored the curious onlookers, heading straight for a white clapboard building with a sign identifying it as Dr. Horace Fleming's office. The doctor, a balding man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, took charge immediately, directing Quint to bring Bethany inside. She was settled on an examining table, where Dr. Fleming confirmed what Quint had already determined: a clean break of the tibia. "You did a fine job with this splint, Quint," the doctor remarked, examining Bethany's leg. "Set it properly, too. You ever consider a career in medicine?" "Had enough of patching up broken men during the war," Quint replied, his voice holding an edge Bethany hadn't heard before. "Prefer horses these days. They complain less." While the doctor worked on applying a proper cast to Bethany's leg, the sheriff arrived, alerted by townspeople about the injured woman. When Bethany described the stagecoach robbery and identified one of the attackers as Deputy Marshal, the sheriff's face darkened with anger. "Been suspecting Marshall was mixed up with the Harris gang," he growled. "This confirms it. I'll send a posse out right away." "I want to go with them," Quint stated, his tone brooking no argument. "I know the area where Miss Blackburn was attacked better than most." The sheriff nodded. "Could use you, Quint. Be ready to ride in an hour." After the sheriff left, Bethany reached for Quint's hand. "You don't have to do this." His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. "Those men left you to die. They need to be brought to justice." There was steel in his voice, and Bethany realized that, beneath his gentle manner, lay an unshakable sense of right and wrong. It made her admire him all the more. Dr. Fleming finished with her leg and gave her laudanum for the pain. As the medicine took effect, making the world soft around the edges, Bethany became aware of voices discussing her situation. "The school boards prepared a room for her at the Widow Jenkins boarding house," the doctor was saying, "but she won't be able to start teaching for at least 6 weeks with that leg." "I'll cover her board until then," Quint replied without hesitation, "and anything else she needs." "That's mighty generous, considering you barely know the lady." There was a pause before Quint answered, his voice low. "Some things you just know, Doc, from the moment I heard her calling out in that storm." The rest of his words faded as Bethany drifted to sleep, but the sentiment behind them warmed her more than any fire could. When she woke, she was in a neat, sun-filled room. A gray-haired woman with a kind face was arranging flowers on the bedside table. "There you are, dearie," the woman said with a smile. "I'm Martha Jenkins. Welcome to Silver Creek, though I wish the circumstances were better." Bethany thanked her, then asked the question foremost in her mind. "Mr. Ryder Quint, is he still here?" Martha's smile softened. "He rode out with the posse yesterday afternoon. Left instructions that you were to want for nothing and settled your board for 3 months, though I told him that was excessive." "Yesterday," Bethany echoed, confused. "How long have I been asleep?" "Nearly a day and a half." "Doctor said it was the exhaustion and shock catching up with you, plus the laudanum." A knock at the door interrupted them. Martha opened it to reveal a delegation from the school board, 3 men in their Sunday best, looking uncomfortable and concerned. "Miss Blackburn," the eldest began, twisting his hat in his hands, "we're mighty sorry about what happened. If we'd known the stage would be attacked." "You couldn't have known," Bethany assured him. "No one could." They explained that school would be delayed until she recovered, which was a relief. The thought of teaching while confined to bed was daunting. They also brought her trunk, which had been recovered from the waylaid stagecoach and delivered to town by a freight wagon. The next few days passed slowly. Bethany received a stream of visitors, curious townspeople, students and their parents, ladies from the church bringing food and offers of assistance. All were kind, but none were the person she most wanted to see. Martha kept her informed about the posse's progress, relaying news that came back with supply riders. They had found the stagecoach abandoned, caught up with the Harris gang at their hideout in the foothills, and engaged in a shootout. 2 of the outlaws had been killed, 3 captured, including the treacherous deputy. But the reports said nothing specific about Quint. A week after her arrival in Silver Creek, Bethany was sitting in a chair by her window, her casted leg propped on a stool, watching the street below. The autumn afternoon was waning, golden lights slanting across the dusty main street when a group of riders appeared at the far end of town. Even at a distance, she recognized Quint's broad shoulders and the way he sat a horse straight-backed but relaxed, as if he and the animal were one. Her heart quickened as the riders approached, townsfolk gathering to greet them. From her window, she watched as Quint dismounted in front of the sheriff's office. He looked tired, his clothes trail worn, a week's growth of beard shadowing his jaw. After a brief conversation with the sheriff, he handed off his horse to a stable boy and turned not toward the saloon where the other riders were heading, but toward the boarding house, toward her. Martha met him at the front door. Bethany couldn't hear their exchange, but moments later there was a knock at her door. When she called "Enter," Quint stood in the doorway, hat in hand. "Miss Blackburn," he said formally, though his eyes held a warmth that belied the stiff greeting. "You're looking better." "Mr. Ryder," she returned, fighting a smile. "You look terrible." A laugh escaped him, breaking the tension. "Honest as ever, I see. Mind if I come in? Mrs. Jenkins said it was proper so long as the door stays open. Please." Bethany gestured to the chair opposite hers. As he settled into it, she noticed a healing cut along his hairline. "You're hurt." "This," Quint touched the wound dismissively, "just a graze. One of the Harris boys was a better shot than I gave him credit for." Fear gripped her at how close he'd come to serious injury. "You could have been killed." "Could have," he agreed, his gaze steady on hers. "But I wasn't. And those men won't be threatening anyone again. 3 are headed for trial, including Marshall. The other 2 won't be troubling anyone in this life." There was no boasting in his tone, just a simple statement of fact. Bethany nodded, understanding that justice in this territory often came at the end of a gun. "I want to thank you," she said softly, "for the room, for everything. But I can't accept your charity indefinitely." "Once I'm able to teach, it's not charity," Quint interrupted, leaning forward, his eyes intense. "Bethany. May I call you Bethany?" She nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. "Bethany, I know we've only just met, and under strange circumstances at that. But out here, life doesn't always give you the luxury of time. When I found you in that canyon, something happened to me, something I can't explain." He ran a hand through his hair, searching for words. "I've lived alone since coming west, been content that way. But carrying you through that storm, holding you through the night, it woke something in me I thought was long dead." Hope bloomed in Bethany's chest, a feeling so unexpected and powerful it left her breathless. "Quint, I'm not asking for promises," he hurried on. "Just a chance to call on you properly. To see if what I felt, what I think you might have felt too, is real." "It's real," Bethany whispered, her voice steady despite the emotion welling within her. "I felt it too." The smile that spread across Quint's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual, then brilliantly beautiful. He reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his rough one. "Then I reckon we've got some courting to do, Miss Blackburn. Once you're up and about, I'd like to show you my ranch. It's not much yet, but there's good water, fine grazing land, room to grow." "I'd like that," Bethany said, squeezing his hand. "Very much." Over the weeks that followed, as autumn deepened into winter, Quint called on Bethany regularly. He brought her books from his small collection, wildflowers until the frost claimed them, then sprigs of evergreen tied with ribbon. They talked for hours about everything and nothing: his dreams for the ranch, her hopes for the school, their shared love of music discovered when he admitted to playing the fiddle. When she was finally able to begin teaching, he insisted on driving her to and from the schoolhouse each day in his wagon, unwilling to let her navigate the icy streets on crutches. The townsfolk watched their courtship with approving eyes, Martha Jenkins declaring they were made for each other, plain as day. By spring, when the cast came off and Bethany took her first unaided steps in months, Quint was waiting with a ring, a simple silver band with a small sapphire that had belonged to his mother. "It matches your eyes," he said as he slipped it onto her finger after she accepted his proposal. "I've been carrying it since Christmas, waiting for the right moment." They were married in May, with wildflowers carpeting the hills around Silver Creek and the whole town turning out to celebrate. The school board arranged for a substitute teacher to finish the term, giving the newlyweds time to settle into their life together at the Double R. The ranch house was small but sturdy, with windows that caught the morning light. Quint had added a room before bringing Bethany home as his bride, a front parlor with space for the piano he'd ordered from Denver as a wedding gift. "A home needs music," he said when she gasped at the magnificent instrument, "and I need to hear you play." That first night in their home, after Bethany had played for him and they'd shared a simple supper, a spring storm blew in, rain lashing against the windows, thunder rolling across the plains. As they lay in bed, wrapped in each other's arms, Bethany couldn't help but think of that other storm, the one that had nearly claimed her life but had instead given her something far more precious. "I was thinking," Quint murmured against her hair, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her back. "We should ride up to the canyon come summer. Not where you fell, a different part. There's a place where wildflowers grow thick as carpet and you can see for miles." "I'd like that," Bethany replied, nestling closer, "to make new memories there." "The first of many," Quint promised, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I plan to make memories with you for the next 50 years, Mrs. Ryder." Outside, the storm raged on, but within the walls of their home, wrapped in the warmth of their love, Bethany felt only peace. From the depths of that cold canyon to the heart of this good man, she had found her place in this wild, beautiful land, not just surviving, but truly living, for the first time in her life.